today's session is going to be kind of interactive. So I do hope that y'all feel comfortable with, opening your, unmuting yourselves, and giving us your opinions and thoughts, because I think today's session in particular is going to really benefit from that kind of participation, because we're in some ways going to be crowdsourcing our ideas um, amongst each other. And part of the reason for that is because tonight's session is what we're calling artist fundraising strategies. And what we mean by artist fundraising strategies is really going to focus not so much on like the crowdfunding aspect of this, although that is very important. Crowdfunding in the sense of like using Kickstarter and using GoFundMe, like those are tools and strategies that you can absolutely use to get your projects off the ground. But there are other strategies that can be equally as effective in helping you not only gain followers and gain support, but also leverage other skills and talents that you have. So we're going to talk about that today. And to just welcome anybody that is on our live streams at the moment. Distill Arts, DSTL Arts is a nonprofit arts mentorship organization that inspires, teaches, and hires emerging artists from underserved communities. And our goal through these particular professional development seminars is to teach people not only the skills, but also the tools and techniques that are relevant to being a working artist. We firmly believe in the concept of developing skills and transcending limits through the arts. It is so important to us that it is actually part of our name. The programs that we offer include, of course, our Conchas y Café bilingual community writing workshops. It's a 15-week series that's offered twice a year for adults, focusing on poetry, creative writing, and it also produces a biannual zine called Conchas y Café Zine. Art Block Zine and Artistic Zine obviously are also zines, being that it's in the title. Art Block is like our love letter to LA, whereas Artistic Zine is really our platform for neurodivergent artists to share their voice and stories through their own artwork. And this particular professional development seminar is being brought to you by our Poet Artist Development Program. The Poet Artist Development Program is a mentorship program for emerging artists from historically marginalized communities. And if you'd like to learn more, I definitely recommend visiting our website at DSTLArts.org. So, quick little check in here. For those of you in the program and joining live at the moment, what do you remember about our previous professional development seminars? What are some of the key takeaways that you've uh, kind of taken from them up to this point? And feel free to
Have a specific brand.
right. Have a specific brand. Good, good. Thank you, Richard. Anyone else?
Budgeting is very important.
Right. Budgeting is very important. Fonts and legibility are important as well. Thank you, Mojde. Thank you, Jamie. Having a strong vision makes the process a lot clearer, right? It is very important. Hide the bodies, Abraham. Come on now. Those are not the kinds of things we say on live streams.
Discipline and commitment is very important.
Yes, discipline and commitment to yourself above all else, I guess. In the sense of, discipline and commitment to your brand, to your values, to your, individual arts practice. That is absolutely important. And Evan added, you have to see your art as part of a professional business. That's absolutely right. We want all of you to really understand that, the starving artist concept is not really the way that we should be thinking. We need to have the mentality, the mindset of an entrepreneur, because in the end, that is what you are. You are a creative entrepreneur. And as creative entrepreneurs, it's really important to remember this. This particular quote comes from Simon Sinek from Start with why, how great leaders inspire everyone to take action. That is Simon Sinek's book. Simon Sinek himself was born on October 9th in 1973 and is a British American author and inspirational speaker. So the quote says, "People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe." So, what does this say to you? Do you agree with this particular quote? Any specific reactions to this quote that you might have?
I mean, that's why we have famous artists, and in history class, they'll tell just their story, is because we're not just invested on the piece, we also invested of the journey of the artist, or why they make things, or why things come out the way they are.
Yeah, yeah. And in our Instagram live, we have, yes, businesses can say one thing and show us something else. Yeah, that's pretty true. I think, oh, go ahead, Jamie.
Oh, sorry. It just reminded me of the marketing kind of like the professional development we had on marketing about how like people like the product or whatever it is that you're making for an audience has to have like a story and like this and the story has to sort of be attached to like values maybe that would appeal to
Mhm.
the kind of like audience um that you're aiming to expose your work to, for example, if you're an artist. So it's about the why is like pretty much like why you're motivated to make this, and all of those things are connected.
Yeah, I like how you brought that in, right? It's about representing your values and, the answering for yourself and maybe for your audience the why your work is important. And I think that is something that we oftentimes are sort of tricked in believing that it isn't. We have a lot of times self-doubt, we have a lot of times this imposter syndrome as artists that in a lot of occasions will sort of hinder us, right? It'll keep us from living up to our full potential. And in some ways, it comes down to what society tells us. But at the same time, society is always telling us that, our story is important, that our, voice needs to be heard. And then, very subtly or not so subtly, our voices are stopped or stomped on because we're of a particular, ethnic group, or we are of a particular gender or sexual orientation. Those kinds of things do keep us in a lot of ways, limited to whatever is available to us. But the truth is that, as Evan pointed out, your personal story is part of why those who are loyal toward your vision choose to invest in you and your work. That's the beautiful thing about expressing your voice, is that you do end up forming a community, and community is where it's at. Community is ultimately the people for whom you are doing the work, and really why you should invest in yourself and in your arts practice. As Angie said earlier, it's about having that discipline and dedication to who you are and your own betterment. And so, as Mojde says in the chat, have a vision and a mission. Those two things are going to propel you forward, and they're going to be the reason why people buy into your work. So now that we've kind of established that, we as an organization, we are first and foremost an arts mentorship organization. We are here to provide mentorship to artists such as yourselves. Secondly, we're also a small press. And as a small press, when we talk about publishing, we usually are talking about literary publishing, and it's now more cost effective than ever before. In the past, it was difficult to, just put out even a small print run of a chapbook, but it's not so much that case anymore. Also, because publishing these days isn't just literary specific, some of the ideas that we're going to go over today they do apply in other fields, media, and the way in which people consume media has evolved over time. So when we talk about publishing and some of the things that we'll discuss today, they don't always have to be for just a book or a chapbook in our case. It can also be for like a podcast or a very short film. It could be even for things like the development of an app or a smart device or a game. Those are all creative practices that do have some aspect of publishing. That said, we're going to focus on print media specifically. And the question that I have for you is, what is the appeal of publishing? Why is publishing so important? And beyond that, what are the benefits of, quote, having a polished product that showcases your artwork and skills to the world? That question is for you. Right? What is it that really brought you to Distill Arts? For those of you with us on Zoom, what is it about potentially publishing a chapbook that pushed you to apply to our poet artist development program?
I'll throw one out there.
Mhm.
So, it's very easy these days to put together something, write something, and then throw it up on Kindle Direct Publishing and publish it as an ebook. But that can be very solitary and not very effective. And so why I said yes to DSTL Arts was because I wanted to be part of a community and part of a larger movement.
Well, thank you, Richard. And we're definitely happy to have you here as part of our community. Anyone
I
else
think
have anything? Oh,
Oh, yes. I think it lends a sense of legitimacy to an artist's like body of work. I think the idea of publishing means that like you've done enough work. It's like sort of like showcasing the kind of work that you do to the wider audience and saying like, hey, I did this. And it's like the difference between somebody who's been writing for a very long time but then like never published, then nobody knows what you've done. Ultimately the wider audience will never get to experience your work. And so publishing through, especially through a quote unquote official source,
mhm.
lends legitimacy to the artists and their work, which like doesn't mean artists who don't have access to that don't have works that are worthwhile to publish. It's just I think it's helpful for their brand, their everything, to lend legitimacy basically to their artistry.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate your thoughts on that, Jamie, because whether we want to admit it to ourselves or not, as Richard said, you could just as easily publish to something akin to Kindle Direct Publishing or through iBooks and the Apple Bookstore. You could even just distribute a PDF, on a website and charge people for the download. And, that is fine. And that is a form of publishing. But there is something to be said about publishing in community and publishing in a way that adds legitimacy to your work, and again, it comes down to the sense of the business mindset, at least that's how I kind of think about it. And Evan added, you want to share your work on a wider spectrum than you can without publishing. This program shows me the behind the scenes to help my professional development as I work toward that goal of sharing my work. Yeah. I think there's definitely a benefit to understanding the behind the scenes parts of the publishing world, of even just operating as an artist. Part of the reason why I started Distill Arts 12 years ago now is because of that, because I wanted to have a my own essentially nonprofit that taught people the things that I had to learn on my own. All of the things that we're going to cover today are things that I either picked up in collaboration with Abraham and Angie, or they're things that I just learned by myself through trial and error, and through a lot of research. And there's obviously a benefit to doing those things for yourself, but you know why do it on your own when someone else already has, right? So to give you a better sense of what publishing looks like, right? And remember, self-publishing isn't necessarily a less legitimate way of publishing. It's actually a super beneficial way for most people that have a story to tell. But again, let's break down the cost of self-publishing a book specifically. Now, this table right here, I recently updated it with some slightly more newer figures. But do keep in mind that these are averages. They're not the exact amounts that you would potentially be paying if you were to self-publish a book. Also, keep in mind that some of these things are also optional, like a cover design and paying an editor, a copy editor. Those things are optional. You do not necessarily have to pay for those things. Now, the benefit to paying for them is that you are working with a professional, someone that has experience and practice doing these things. So that said, like, be prepared to spend anywhere from $600 to $2,000 at least on average, for a professional designer, professional artist to, design a cover that will help your book stand out in the crowd. Of course, editing is very, very important. Again, it adds to this idea of legitimacy that we're all taught to believe in. There's obviously no right or wrong way to write poetry, but sometimes if a word is misspelled, a word is misspelled. And if you miss those words on a regular basis, that starts to question, um, people start to kind of question your skills to a certain degree, especially if it's not on purpose, right? Exactly, Jamie. So, there is a benefit to having an editor who can help you correct grammar mistakes or spelling mistakes. That could cost you anywhere from $300 to $2,000 as well. Most copy editors will charge anywhere from like 5 cents to 10 cents a word. So, you can do the math there depending on how long of a manuscript you have. Formatting and book design is one of those areas where you could definitely do it on the cheap, in the sense of, like, if you're doing a handmade mini zine or a handmade chapbook, you could probably do your master template for like the cost of everyday print materials, right? $25 for a ream of paper is kind of average if you're talking about nice quality paper. um, and a basic printer, and that's probably about what I have spent in the past on materials for making my own handmade zines in a very limited run. Another thing I should note is that most of these figures that you see here, once you total them all up from, promotion, if you decide to invest in Facebook ads and Instagram ads, if you do end up wanting to go with a professional designer, that could be anywhere from $3,500 to up to 10 grand. That just really depends largely on who you're working with and their experience as well. But all of these costs that you see here, this is just for what would be the print ready files. This isn't for the actual, print run. This is just the one file that you then send off to a printer to then have them printed. And of course, everyone should be investing in a website at the minimum. Under author tools, I have listed things like a website, things like professional development courses or seminars, which you're fortunately getting for free today. But it could be also things like membership dues with trade organizations that support authors. All of those things you would potentially be paying on a regular sort of subscription basis, at minimum $175 for just simple web hosting. And then copywriting fees, you want to include that because you want to protect your intellectual property. And then a book or a zine or an app, a lot of those things actually can be registered with an ISBN. So you want to buy the ISBN, obviously, which each is $125, although there are discounts available for the whole thing. But again, look at how much it costs just for the design files, just for the print ready, publish ready files. You could spend anywhere from almost $1,100 up to $8,200. And that's just for one title. So This isn't to scare you or anything, but it's to just kind of be realistic with you. These are some of the costs that you would be incurring on your own if you were going down this path of self-publishing. And in the bigger scheme of things, it may not really be that much if you are able to do a print run that then allows you to recover a lot of these costs, which, we'll talk about in a little bit. Does anyone have any questions or comments on some of these figures here?
I just have a question about
Mhm.
I mean, I've done a little bit of studying, on my own, and I've heard people talking about doing like pre-sales.
Yeah.
Will you guys talk about that a little bit, or is that going to be like another?
Yeah, no, that's basically what today is dedicated to. The concept of pre-sales is one way to do startup fundraising for this, but there's a lot of other ways. And like I said, you could also use things like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, GoFundMe. Those are all also valid ways to do your fundraising, but they're not the end all be all. And yes, you can also generate donations from social media, but you might end up hitting a wall there too. Your social media network may not be very big to start. It may be big, but people don't really engage. There's a lot of different things that you can take into account there, um but it is one of the strategies, and it's a strategy worth at least mentioning. um, there's a question from Evan, and then I'll let Abraham speak. Is ISBN a one-time fee, and does it ever expire? So an ISBN, once it is registered to a publisher, it never expires as long as that publisher remains in existence. And it's essentially like a lifetime thing. So, for the life of the printed version or the published version of that book, that single ISBN number will always be uh, registered to that particular title that it's associated with. Um, that said, if you're going to print a book and then also have the same book available as an ebook, and then that same book is also an audio book, that's three different versions of the same title. And each one of those versions requires its own ISBN number. So if you're going to go that route, just realize that you need three total ISBN numbers. And if you're buying them at $125 each, then you have to add that into your budget. You have to understand that those are incremental costs that do impact your bottom line. The good thing is that Bowker, the only organization that is allowed to sell ISBN numbers to the public, they do offer discounts. So you can buy 10 at once for like $250, or you could buy 100 for like about, I think it was 400, maybe $500. So, it's a big, big discount depending on how many you buy. Abraham?
Well, does everybody need an ISBN number, by the way? Because I think some places when you print, they can offer you that as well, right?
Yeah. An ISBN number is going to basically be like the social security number of a publisher. You could think of it that way. If you're publishing direct with, like, say, Amazon through one of their services, they will offer you the opportunity to use one of their ISBN numbers, but that means that they will be the publisher of record, not you. If you start your own business and you are a publisher, or if you anticipate publishing, you're better off buying your own ISBN and then attaching it to whatever that title is. Because in the end, you're kind of like renting, you could almost say, an ISBN from another company like, Amazon or Blurb or anything like that. Um, and publisher and writer are not always the same, but they can be the same. Uh, those are the things that are a little bit more nuanced, which we can go into more in depth in a future seminar. But in the end, it's not a requirement to have an ISBN number. It is if you want your work to be distributed worldwide. And ultimately, it's again like the social security number of a publisher. It shows on the book itself when it's looked up who the publisher is and who the author is, and there's a lot of data that goes into the ISBN number and its associated titles. But good question, Abraham. Same with copywriting, by the way. You do not have to copyright, but if you do copyright your work, there's different types of copyrights out there depending on the type of work that you're copywriting, and the prices range from, like I said here, $45 up to $125 for literary works. Yeah. And a copyright, the purpose of a copyright is to, just protect your work from being, intellectually robbed. Other people will not be able to claim your work as theirs if your work is copywritten. It's also different from, like, copywriting a book is different from copywriting a single poem or the manuscript. A publisher can copyright a book, and you can copyright your manuscript, and you're licensing the book manuscript to them, the publisher, who can also copyright the book, but it would be just the book as an art object, not as their own manuscript, if that makes sense. Again, these things are things that we, will cover actually in a future seminar, so I can explain them a little bit more in depth then. But good questions. All right. Now, to give you a sense of how we budget our program budget for the Poet Artist Development Program and the printing of chapbooks, it's important for us to mention that printing fees will vary based on the format, the page count, and a couple of other things, whether it's color, if it's economy color versus premium color, if it's black and white, if it's going to be a magazine stock paper, those things will do impact the bottom line of how much a particular title will cost when it's printed. But here is how we generally come up with how much money we're going to invest in each one of you who decide to publish your chapbooks through DSTL Arts. A 5x8-inch trade book. So for those of you who have been in like Conchas y Café, you might have received one of these, or you might have seen them, at some point. Those are the 5x8 trade books, and we typically print those in black and white. Black and white obviously is perfect for things that are predominantly text. Color is better for things that have, illustrations and that kind of thing. Also, the price of the printing does go up based on, the size. So this is the smallest size. This is the cheapest figures that we can present to you. But if you look at it, for 120 pages, which is definitely more than what a chapbook normally would be, but we try to give ourselves that wiggle room to be able to, accommodate potentially more pages than we sometimes get. But this is for a 120-page long, essentially Conchas y Café zine. Each unit comes out to be about $8.83, according to Blurb's website. And that is the service that we use. It's a print-on-demand service. For each individual title, it ends up being about $3.99 for shipping. And that's coming here to LA, to the DSTL Arts office. So when you combine the unit cost, so each individual copy plus the shipping, it comes out to approximately $12. Right? That's how much it costs for one individual copy. Now, the nice thing about printing in bulk is that, at least with Blurb, you get a discount. So if we end up printing a total of 100 units, right? So 100 copies of a Conchas y Café zine or 100 copies of a chapbook, we end up spending approximately $726.99. And that's including the $65 shipping, standard shipping. That's not like, super fast shipping, but they do a pretty good job. They send the work pretty quickly when it's done. So that's just for the printing costs. That doesn't include things like sales tax, right? We have to always think about the sales tax because we have to pay taxes whether we like it or not. And then this is approximately how much our time costs. So DSTL Arts staff time is approximately $280 an hour. That is, based on our budget, based on our programs, like this is how much we would charge an hour for our services. And the creation of a chapbook at minimum is approximately 30 hours. So here you see that the majority of the cost actually goes into staff time, right? You want to make sure that you pay yourself first when it comes to doing these sorts of projects, because time is a resource and time has a value. Your value will change based on things like experience, based on the skill levels. Like those are things for you to kind of develop over time as you develop your budgets. Your we'll call them organizational budget, your business budget. These are things that you will start to see as you develop a more fleshed out budget. But again, that's where the majority of the cost goes to, is staff time. So what that means is that for a black and white book, chapbook, 100 of them, a print run of 100, it costs about $9,200. The price difference between color and black and white really isn't that significant. It's about $70, almost $80. So this right here, for us as an organization, as a nonprofit organization, this is what it costs us. And this is how much money we're actually investing just in the printing and development of your chapbooks. This does not include our time developing the lessons, teaching you these things, mentorship, all of those other extra things that we do. That's still a separate type of budget. This is our budget for printing a chapbook. Now, imagine if we asked you to pay for all of this. All right. You're fortunate that we don't, we don't have to ask you for that, because we do get the support and funding from generous donors and funders at the different state and county levels, city levels. All of those things are covered through grants that we receive. But if you remember, when we came up here to this one, the cost for you to do all of this could be anywhere from $1,000 to $8,200, right? The resources that we bring to the table, for us, it would cost about, $1,000 more, right? And again, imagine if you were doing this for yourself, where would you start? Well, one of the places where you could start is by, understanding that there's a lot of other things that are associated with this, but, creating a budget. And I'm not going to go too deep into this particular table, but, these are some other things to consider. Print on demand services are a good option for printing, because that means that you can print in small batches, or you can print in large batches. You obviously pay for the shipping each time that you do a print run, but that can give you some flexibility on how much it costs for printing. Also, print on demand services, because most of them are web based, you can take advantage of the global retail network to be part of the distribution for your books. Because it's one thing to print them, it's another thing to get them out there into the world, right? If you work with a local printer, somebody that's either in LA or, in the other areas near LA, you can work with them and they might offer you other options for binding, for sizes. There's sometimes like discounts that they'll offer because they'll design the book for you. There's different options out there in the world. Sometimes it could be a little bit more expensive. Sometimes it might be cheaper than a print on demand service. I can tell you that in my experience, most of the time they're going to be a little bit cheaper. But the thing is that they run on economies of scale. So the more you print, the larger the discount. And, when you have a lot of books that you have to store, you really need to think about, how are you going to get it out there into the world? So again, that's where the distribution and the storage really come in. So these add additional costs in some cases. One of the ways that you could get it out in the world is through consignment, what I call the local retail network. You just go from bookstore to bookstore and say, hey, can you either buy a few copies, or we can do a deal where you have it up on your shelves and you pay me 60% of the retail price. You keep 40%. That's a pretty standard consignment contract, but that's one way to do it. Obviously, if you have your own website, you could do direct to consumer and you're just selling and mailing yourself. That would go with direct shipping, right? And also even self storage. So you'd be renting a storage unit, or you might have an office, or you might have a room in your house, in your apartment, a closet where you can store all of these books that you have printed. Um, and you can use the U.S. Postal Service as your shipping option, right? It's usually the cheapest, especially if you take advantage of what they call media mail. Media mail is specifically for printed materials like books, and especially if you're sending it to like schools and universities. But you can also obviously get by and sending it directly to individuals as well. Drop shipping is also an option. Drop shipping is where you have the books printed and then it's sent to a like warehouse, and then they are responsible for tracking and tagging your merchandise, and then they sell it kind of directly to the consumer by way of your request. So a person buys it from you, you send a notice to the drop shipper, and then they pack and ship it for you. You know, sometimes that is going to require an additional fee, an inventory fee, but that is also an option. But the main thing is just again getting your work out there. So take advantage of things like the global retail network. Take advantage of using the local bookstores, independent bookstores. Like those are all different ways in which you can get your work out there. That in some cases it's cheap and free, or has like a minimal impact on your final profit margins. And again, create a budget. These things are really useful. A budget is a roadmap, and it's going to help you make decisions on how you want to approach your fundraising. Whether it's a complete business wide budget or a small project specific budget, it's all about setting goals, right? If you set goals, you can actually spread out how much you spend on fundraising and how much you will rely on things like Kickstarter, which, again, like we mentioned before, it's going to kind of be social media heavy if you're going that route. And if you know that that's going to get exhausting for you, then consider other options because they do exist. Fundraising is not going to be just one strategy and done. It is going to ultimately be a bunch of different strategies all working together to support the same goal for you, publishing your work. And again, remember, a budget is a moral document. So whether you're allocating money to the paper that you're going to use, and you really want to make sure that people have a very high quality paper, understand that's going to show what you value, right? And that will kind of reflect the why people will support your work, because you're giving them something that is ultra high quality. If it's about you know I don't know, maybe investing a little bit more in the marketing side of things. That's where you're going to show that you're really trying to build community through social media, through, attending events. All of those things can play into your budget, and where you spend the money is going to, again, show what you value as an individual and as a business owner. You as an artist are a business owner at all times. Does anyone have any questions so far or comments? So then let's talk about those ideas. Again, this one might seem kind of obvious, but you can sell your services and merchandise. We were at the Print Pomona Art Book Fair this past weekend, and there were plenty of people out there tabling, selling merchandise, and using that as an opportunity to also sell services. Um, they came prepared with their business cards, and I'm sure some people got gigs out of being there, not just, the immediate sales of their merchandise. But, taking commissions is obviously one way in which you can begin fundraising for an artist project. Writers are also copywriters and copy editors. If you feel like your grammar and spelling skills are on point, then why not? You can offer for a fee, to uh, look over somebody else's work, charge them for it, and then use that money to then fund your own projects. If you're a visual artist and you know how to use Photoshop, guess what? you are also a designer, right? You can do some design work using Photoshop. If you're familiar with Illustrator or something like Procreate, which can also work in vectors, then you could do logo designs and you can do business cards for people. There's a lot of options out there. Obviously, photographers have a lot of other options too, like portrait work, weddings, events, that kind of thing. And illustrators can always do commissions, whether that be uh, doing cover art for someone else's book or selling prints and that kind of thing. And as you think about your unique skills, right? How else can you leverage your creative skills? What else can you do that is relatively low cost, isn't going to be too time consuming for you, and allows you to begin that fundraising path for your projects? Does anyone have any things that immediately pop to mind for them that they would like to share? Tutoring? Good. Exactly. You know. Yes, Abraham?
Just to continue with what Roots pointed well way back, let's say you want to do a pre-sale
Mm,
and you have a bunch of people who are interested in helping you. You can do programs of saying, oh, if you donate this much or you buy this, I'll give you I don't know, an extra hardcover for
mhm.
donations. Or I can put a list of names in the book at the end that says like all thanks to blah 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 blah, just depending on what kind of money you gave to the cause.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the nice things about crowdfunding is that you can do different tiers, right? For a person that gives you $1, maybe they get a pin or a mini zine. For a person that gives you $10, they get the mini zine and they get their name printed in the cover. There's little things like that that you could do. Even a hug, as Abraham said. And yeah, just to go back to Jamie's comment about tutoring, right? If you feel like you are um, patient enough to teach a person, yeah, you could totally tutor. Tutoring in math, that's always a good one. Tutoring in English, if you're working with, particular populations, you can, do basic English up to like more advanced critical thinking and essay critiquing, right? So there's definitely ways in which you can kind of put together a at least a portion, right? Because again, remember, fundraising isn't about one strategy being the only way in which you fundraise. You have to really think about multiple revenue sources for yourself, and this is just one. Evan?
Just speaking to the idea of community and how important it is to feel like you're in a community and also those who are supporting you are kind of backing your goal and your vision.
Mm,
Patreon is a great thing because it doesn't have to be an expensive type of thing where they're paying ahead of time without really knowing anything about your work
mhm.
and they're following your journey. You could put out, content of this is where I'm at. These are my ups, these are my downs. And you're building a community within the people who are supporting you,
Mhm.
but you're also kind of crowdfunding.
Yeah. Yeah, and it goes back to our opening quote, right? About people will buy into the things you're doing because of the why, right? Because it's you, because it's your personal story. That is obviously how crowdfunding, at least effective crowdfunding, can can work. Patreon is definitely a good resource for that type of thing as well. um and having patrons is obviously going to have uh, a community building impact, a community building effect, and being transparent of the process, about how you are developing your project. All of those things will help you generate donations and support in the community. And again, in addition to that, right, invest in low cost, easy to produce merchandise. If you know how to do the mini zine using just one single sheet of paper, that technique of printing on just a single sheet of paper that you fold into a little booklet, uh, it might cost you something as small as like 5 cents to do just black and white, and then obviously your time folding and cutting. But something like that, believe it or not, can have a bigger impact than you might expect. a person can look at that and be like, oh, hey, is this like a business card? Like, can I, maybe have you do one for me? Um, I never thought that it would happen, but my zine making did lead to me getting a contract with Metro LA, right? The actual Metro art division had me create a zine for them, and they paid me a couple $1,000s to do it. So, like you don't really know until you try, what is going to get people's attention and help you build your community. So little things like mini zines, you could buy labels, right? Mailing labels, simple, like maybe 2 by 4 inch mailing labels. And if you are an illustrator and you design a simple illustration, you could print that onto your mailing labels and turn those into stickers. You can just cut them out, and turn them into a sticker, and voila, you got another little piece of merch that you can sell. Doesn't have to be super expensive, doesn't have to be super high end. There is an aesthetic in a crowd that will enjoy that DIY nature of merchandise. Of course, if you want to invest a little bit more money, then you can like get vinyl stickers, vinyl screen printed stickers from someone like Sticker Robot, which does amazing work and has, a relatively inexpensive entry point for creating stickers. Bundle them up, and there you go. Another fundraising source for you. And again, the nice thing about having merchandise is that you can use them as incentives, right? Person buys a pre-sale, in the meantime, you get a bookmarker that's also a sticker. And there's a lot of different things that you can do with simple office supplies. Just off the top of your head, what can you do with what you might find in a clearance bin, right? How many of you been to like an Office Depot and checked out their clearance bin and found things that you might not think about, but could potentially be an art supply for you? Or better yet, how many of you know about the Blick Art Supply Store? There's one in Pasadena, one in Mid City. They have a clearance area usually. Yeah, me too, Jamie. And there's a reason why I have a lot of art supplies that are just kind of sitting around. It's because the clearance bin is always full of something useful, right? You can get tiny little, canvases, and you can do a simple little painting. They do have student discounts if you're a student. You can always take advantage of that. And not to like put Richard on the spot, but he sold a small painting over the weekend when he joined us at the Pomona Art Book Fair, and it wasn't a super big painting, but how much did you actually spend on the materials for that, Richard? If you don't mind us asking.
Enough.
Enough.
Yeah. Basically, like between the cyanotype paint and the mini canvases, they were about $4 per item.
There you go. And he flipped that and made himself a profit. Maybe not enough to cover his time, but it was still something that got his name out there and could be used to go towards now the project that he might want to do next. You see? So every little dollar does add up if you want to look at it that way, right? Richard is definitely a salesman. And do look online too. I mean, you never know what you'll find online. Amazon, for as uh terrible as it is for the environment, like sometimes, it is cheap and it is a good way to fill a need, like don't knock something just because it doesn't fit your ideals all the time. Sometimes there are going to be sacrifices that you'll need to make. And, I don't necessarily like to say that, but it's kind of a reality for us, especially when we're starting off with not a whole lot. To that end, you can also organize a pop-up event and think of other ways in which you can, capitalize on other skills that you have. Obviously, the main thing that you could do is do a fee-based workshop, right? You can charge somebody for your time tutoring them. You can charge them for doing a one-time workshop. You can set up a photo walk or a hike somewhere, and you can encourage people to bring their own cameras, and all you do is bring a box of granolas and some water and say, hey, let's go for this walk, right? Yes, Evan?
I'm just going back to like resources like Blick. There is a store, this is only local to LA, but there's a store in Pasadena that's a thrift store for art crafts. So people who like buy a bunch of stuff and then they don't actually get into that hobby
Mhm.
will donate to this store or sell it. And then you can buy a lot of these supplies at a very big discount. It's called Remainders.
Nice. There
Where
you
is it at?
It's in Pasadena.
Yeah, drop a link in the chat, for those that might be curious. Because I've never heard of that, but see, there you go. Right? There's always things like also Craigslist or eBay. There's definitely other ways in which you can access art supplies. I've even seen people go to thrift stores and pick up like old paintings that are pre-framed, and then they'll actually build artwork on top of that artwork, and kind of remix an old piece of art that nobody wanted into something that is now valuable and can bring them in a little bit of money, right?
Osaro, right?
Fusaro, yeah, exactly. Yeah. For those that are wondering what Fusaro is actually an artist who is based in LA and was also one of our guests on the Art Block podcast, if in case y'all are interested in learning more. Very cool dude, for sure. Thank you, Evan, for sharing the link also. Um, if you're a visual artist and you are inclined to do so, you could also do something like a sip and paint session or sip and draw session. You could do however you want to set it up, right? But if you include anything that is alcoholic and it is for a paying public, those kinds of things do require a liquor license and insurance coverage. So be very, very careful if you're going to go that route. Always make sure that you are protected as an individual and as a business owner. So investing in insurance, event insurance, even if it is just a one-time event, you want to obviously protect yourself from any kind of accidents, especially if you do things like hikes. Again, anything involving liquor, anything that is strenuous, just make sure that you market it and be clear that these things are not meant for people with, certain limitations, and also uh, age restrictions when necessary. Another thing that you could do that's relatively simple if you're a visual artist is you could set up a table or an easel, and you can do caricature drawings, or as I tend to do at our zine fests and stuff, you can do poetry on demand. And a quick little note on the poetry on demand. Over the years now, I have actually increased the price because of inflation, obviously. But doesn't matter that it is $8 per poem at this point. People are very attracted to those kinds of things, and at events like the Print Pomona Art Book Fair, this was actually one of our best sellers. We made more money selling poems on demand than we did in some, to a certain degree, selling books and zines. So that is always an option if you are able to do that kind of thing. What other kinds of things can you leverage though, right? Because it doesn't have to be just art based. If you're a cook, what could you do? Well, if you like making tamales, maybe that could be a way to generate some money. A champurrado stand, Abraham and I were talking about that, I believe the other day, and we were saying, sometimes that is a good hustle. So what else could you do? What other kinds of techniques or skills could you leverage in your everyday life?
Talking about that, some karate ninja lessons. I'm available.
There you go. Sensei Abraham.
I've also seen that people sell like digital products like wallpaper for people's phones, like I don't know, like a coloring pages,
Mm.
different things like that
Yeah.
from your art.
Yeah, those are great examples, Roots. People can sell digital products too, right? If you can set up a simple design file, or if you're using, again, something like Procreate or Photoshop on an iPad or a tablet, you can, create wallpaper art for phones and tablets. You could do dance and performance as a side hustle as Jamie says, right? You can sell clothes and you can thrift. Uh, those little side hustles, even if they're not directly art related, sometimes they can get you to where you want to be. Don't, think that it's not going to be beneficial to you if you're investing time in one thing, It's, I will not say that one out loud, Abraham. Um, but it is, one of those things that you could potentially turn into a vehicle for fundraising. Again, set goals for yourself and understand that it's not just one way or nothing. It is going to have to be multiple ways in which you develop your resources. And yes, I got to give Abraham the credit for always coming up with ideas outside of the box and law.
In legal terms, maybe not, but
Yeah,
in comedian
mhm.
points, I mean.
Well, there you go. Yeah. And yeah, DoorDash, thank you, Evan. I mean, it is a side hustle for a reason for a lot of people. DoorDash, Uber, and that kind of thing. You can make a little bit of extra change, even if you are putting a little bit of wear and tear on your car. Like, again, it's not about um you know, thinking in that this is going to hold you back. It's about understanding that you are investing in yourself and your future. One of those things that is a big investment is time. But then, again, it's time spent towards a goal, right? And if that is what is going to keep you motivated, if you are going to stay motivated and will complete the publication that you're working on, then by all means do it and embrace it. And you'll have a story out of that, you know. And in my past life, I have been a janitor multiple times and I have worked overnights. And I'm not ashamed to say that, because it is one of those things that has brought me to where I am today. And we kind of mentioned this earlier, bartering, right? If you're an illustrator, you could obviously illustrate another person's book. You could potentially barter your service as an illustrator or photographer for their service as a copy editor, right? So there are obviously those opportunities where you could trade your services and your skills as a writer or visual artist for some component of your design or print services. Likewise, you can do that for, I don't know, maybe a tamal sale, right? If you set up a little champurrado stand and you're bartering the, I don't know, the use of a table for I don't know, like social media marketing for a taquero that you'll be set up next to. Like those are ways in which you can help and support each other. So bartering isn't always going to be, something that is like you're selling yourself. You can look at it as a way of also building community. Now, of course, we always want to make sure that as much as possible, you are paying other creatives. Distill Arts is about building community and all, but in the end, it is very important that you really show that you value other people's time, right? You value your time as much as their time, and they will feel that and they will be more than happy to reciprocate. And if you can, again, like share in the profits. It's not a bad thing. Those are my thoughts on bartering. And then kind of as like a, oh yeah, go ahead, Abraham.
Oh, just to add up, we were talking about last time with another writer, and she's mentioning that she got a lot of services by bartering as well.
Mhm.
But another thing you had to point out is, to be fair, you had to also be helpful for other people. So not you're only asking for help when you need it, but also try to be there for other people. And that's always gonna pay back. Just be nice with other people, help them when you can. I know not every time it's possible, but like
Yeah.
that's the way to get into like somebody to help you, I don't know, do something major. Like you have to be there for them as well. So
Mhm.
not be selfish.
Yeah. Yeah. That's important when it comes to bartering for sure. And, I think it's also worth saying, even though I would recommend this as kind of like your last resort, sometimes if your credit is good, it's not a bad thing to pull out a loan if you really believe that you can pay it back through the profits of the work that you are creating, right? Again, this is a very strategic thing to do. it's a general rule of thumb that you want to avoid the burden of debt, especially if you're starting a business that is not profitable yet. So really do avoid going into debt for your arts practice. But again, it is an option. And if you're talking about, loans and personal loans with like family and friends, just make sure that you do it in a way that is transparent with people, right? Treat it as if it was an option to invest, right? If they are investing in you, whether it be $5, $10, $100, you can create a kind of contract that sets the terms for repayment, right? The minute that you start to make a profit off of the sale of your book, begin paying back your debts. You can do it, I don't know, if they're cool, like you can do like a 1% interest rate, right? Like just be fair and really do it with people that you can trust and that can trust you. And as always, with a lot of these things, just be very clear about who owns the rights for the creative work. Um, you know, there's a reason why in some movies, as an example, and Richard, you could probably help me clarify this if I get it wrong, but there's a reason why movies have a lot of producers whose names are flashed on the opening credits. It's because those people invested a certain amount of money into the creation of a particular body of work. And the expectation is that they get that money back through a sharing of the profits. That is one potential way in which you could approach the publishing of a particular kind of project. So do kind of treat it in that way if you're going to ask friends and family to potentially offer you a loan. Um, Ownership and then entitlements to royalties and profits, those are things that, again, you really really want to make sure that you are being transparent about and that you keep records, right? Do contracts. Don't be shy about asking a person to sign something. If they don't want to sign it, then it's probably a sign that you do not want to go into business with them. Yeah, prove that you're reliable. Exactly. And it does add to your positive record. Yeah. Reputation is very important for sure. The impressions you make on other people will increase chances of more people wanting to work with you, and etc. Right? Build bridges, don't burn them. Thank you for all of that, Jamie and Evan. Uh, yeah. When the devil asks you to sign, don't be shy. Yeah, maybe. It depends, Abraham. Um, So yeah, again, treat credit cards and loans as kind of like a last resort. But it is an option. We shouldn't shy away from saying that. And then lastly, structure your project to be cause-based. If you're going to maybe do a project that is focused on climate change, like LA Transit is, for example, maybe you could align your particular project with another organization that is doing something similar in the climate change space or in the mass transit space, right? If there's a nonprofit that is focused on that, maybe you can, pitch the project to them to say, hey, I'm working on this particular project. I would be more than happy to consult with you and offer, workshops for your community that encourage them to use poetry as a way of advocating for change, right? Meanwhile, at the same time, you're using that contracting money to fund part of your project. That is a possibility, right? That is a way that artists do on occasion cover the expenses for creating a work. If you are open to collaborating with other members, community members to develop artwork, that could be a way to, again, incentivize people to, donate and maybe even commit a piece of art that will go in there in the publication. Just as always, just be conscious of how the intellectual property will work, who is going to retain the rights to their work, and how you will approach licensing work in those kinds of situations. And legally speaking, if you get donations and you are not a nonprofit, legally those donations are, um, you know, revenue, right? That is money that is considered income, and it is taxable. The individual person, whatever money they get from whatever source it is taxable. You do have to be prepared to pay taxes. That said, if you are going to make your project be cause-based and you are pledging publicly, right, that you are going to donate a portion of your profits to whatever organization you're partnering with, then be sure to follow up on that, and be transparent about it. People don't have to audit you, but the IRS will, you know, if they think that there's something suspicious going on there. So just be a person of your word, give the money that you pledge to donate, and as much as possible, be transparent about it with your followers, because again, that shows what you value, and it's going to be a reason why people will want to donate in the first place. And also just keep in mind that there will be tax liabilities that you may have to consider when you start receiving donations in that way. But of course, this also is true if you're going to be selling things like merchandise, tamales, champurrado cups, like all of those things are going to be considered income. But, just keep your records, keep receipts, and make sure that you have that conversation with your accountant when it comes time to do your taxes, because your taxes may be reduced because of all these extra activities that you're doing. Any questions so far? All right. So no questions, then we're coming close to the end here. Grants and fellowships are crucial for artists. There's no way for me to phrase it any other way. These are things that you should, as an artist, really be looking for as an additional way in which you get funding. Again, this is not going to be the only way that you generate money to launch a book or a podcast or any other kind of publishable thing, right? But this could help ease the burden if you develop a budget and you set a goal for yourself, right? If you are going to apply for a grant or a fellowship to help fund your work, just be very aware that they are competitive and they are time sensitive. You need to be on top of deadlines. You cannot procrastinate. And the best thing you can do for yourself, as kind of like some general tips, is to be clear about the purpose of your project. Have goals for that project. Have an idea of who the audience is that's going to partake in this, whether it be as a consumer of your project or as an active participant in those projects, right? Really just have those things down, written down somewhere, so that way you can easily turn that into a piece of writing that goes on a grant application. And to that end, also establish a budget. If you're going to apply for a $10,000 grant and you know that it costs about $10,000 to go through the entire process of developing a print ready file, you now have, okay, maybe $2,000 that you need to additionally fundraise for, so that way you can cover the cost of printing. So having that budget early on in this process is going to be a huge time saver. And it's always really good to understand that clear writing is a reflection of clear thinking. The more you understand what the purpose of your project is and who it serves, the easier it's going to be for you to tell people about it. And this isn't just in, grant applications. This is always also going to be when you're talking to friends and family members who may want to invest in your project. This is also going to be a way for you to say, to the person that comes and requests a poem from you, why you're doing it in this particular way, right? Why you're set up on the corner of Spring Street and 4th Street, with a typewriter. Like, if you can tell them, I'm here supporting my particular project, X, Y, and Z, would you like to buy a poem from me? People are going to understand the why, and they're really going to value the fact that you're very clear about your purpose. And that, again, is about how you establish community buy-in, right? You have people who are buying into it. You have people who are supporting it. And as much as you can, have also things like letters of recommendation prepared in advance. Um, you know, have like a list of references of people who have seen your artwork and who will support your artwork as long as you are continuing to develop your craft. Being a part of our little community here, being part of our arts fam, those of you that are enrolled in our mentorship program, you can count on that from us. We are going to be there for you to provide a reference letter, or some sort of I don't know, additional support in helping you develop your grant applications and fellowship applications if you so choose, right? But definitely have that community buy-in and be prepared for that and be prepared to establish that. There's also a couple of things to be very clear about when you're applying for grants. Grants, especially made by nonprofit foundations, a lot of times they'll require some kind of fiscal and legal structure. What that means is that you may end up having to have a fiscal sponsor. Fiscal sponsor sponsors a project for artists on their behalf, helps them apply for grants in the sense that they are going to be listed as the organization that is receiving the check. And then they turn around and give you the money for you to manage as you see fit. Now, keep in mind, fiscal sponsors a lot of times will charge an average of 10% on all grant funds received, including donations. So their service isn't free. There is going to be a cost associated for having a fiscal sponsor. But the nice thing about a fiscal sponsor is that they usually will take care of the more like IRS and legal specific things that you may or may not be able to take care of on your own. They are there to support you in that way. And sometimes they offer other perks like professional development, mentorship, insurance, those kinds of things. Um, but you ultimately, as the person applying for a grant, are going to be considered a project manager. So it's still your responsibility to do those final reports for whatever grants you receive. Fiscal sponsors don't typically do that for you. They might help you with the financial, like reports and that kind of thing. But ultimately, a fiscal sponsor is there just to provide you some of the administrative structure that you would need. And they are worth looking into if you're going to go this route for specific kinds of projects. The other option is to incorporate as a business or even as a nonprofit. I will tell you right now, incorporating as a nonprofit does limit the kinds of things that you can do, in the sense that a nonprofit is specifically for the benefit of the community. And there's certain types of things that you are not allowed to do in terms of like political actions, and you are not allowed to keep all of the profits from any venture that you create. All the profits are meant to be reinvested into the community and your mission. And there's a lot of other legal things that you have to do if you incorporate as a nonprofit, like maintain a board, do uh, a lot of different types of reports that just address how you are using your funding. If you're incorporating as a business, there's different ways in which you can incorporate. We did talk about them before. There's a sole owner, there's the B corporation like tag that you can get. Um, and then, of course, the limited liability corporation. And ownership is different based on how you structure your business, right, or your nonprofit. In the end, they are labor intensive. They do require a lot of work with a lawyer at first. But, the one benefit of being incorporated as a business is that you would be potentially legally protected from, like, say, a house being taken away from you, because, there would be a clear separation of the personal and the business. Um, if you're incorporating as a nonprofit, you obviously also have the benefit of applying for different kinds of grants and fellowships and things like that that would help further the betterment of your community. So if that's part of your values and what you want to go for, then that could potentially work. But in the end, most artists end up choosing for being a fiscally sponsored project, with, again, the opportunity to get at least most of the grant funding and donations that they might receive. a B corporation is called a hive. Nice little joke, Abraham. Lastly, there's a couple of different tips here that we can provide, things that we've learned from our own personal experience. Networking is very important. You never know when you're going to find someone that is connected to money. As an example, Angie, a few years ago during the LA Times Festival of Books, met a board member for a foundation that gives out grants and awards to individual artists who are doing work in the community. And lo and behold, Angie was encouraged to apply by this individual, and Angie got a grant. So you never know when you're going to find people with money. It's just, going to happen if you are putting yourself out there and networking. That's why it is very important to be prepared, right? Invest in business cards, have flyers if it makes sense, and really, really do take serious the website, right? Have a professional website, a professional looking website where people can find information about you to give you money. That's what I meant to say. So, definitely invest in that. That is always going to be one of the things that I encourage people to do. Also, research, not only for your grant opportunities, but also for your budgets. Use current real world costs for everything, especially your supplies and your living wages. Always try to have a good sense of what it costs for you to operate your business as a business owner that is paying themselves as a full-time employee. Even if you are not working as a full-time employee at the time, always create a budget that shows you working as a full-time employee. That will give you a more accurate amount when it comes time to bill like a contractor or somebody like that who has hired you to do a job for them. That $280 that I mentioned before, that is the DSTL Arts hourly rate, that comes from all of us being full-time, even though not all of us are full-time right now. So do very, very seriously consider that. Okay. Um, it's also really useful to have research on the audience demographics that you serve, through your projects, whether that be, the soccer moms that live in Beverly Hills, like just understand who they are and what their interests are. Or if it's, somebody living in South LA who, is a first generation college student and is now looking at their first full-time job, like understand what their interests are and what their aesthetic is. And if that is the demographic that you want your work to speak to, then just have that information available so that way you can write that into grants and into fellowship applications. That is valuable to know. And be adaptable, right? Just be prepared is really what it comes down to. And do consider attending events, trade events like zine fests, art shows, art walks, book fairs, readings. All of those things help to expand your network. They help to also, conduct market research. Again, it's really about understanding who your audience is. And it's also a good opportunity to generate a buzz for your work. You never know who's going to be there. You never know who's going to be your fans until you meet them. So do spend the time going to events. And on the trade events, there's a little table here, a little graph that we generated to kind of give you an idea of what might work for you and what might not work for you. Again, these are somewhat generalized, but not entirely inaccurate based on personal experience and a lot of data research. Zine fests, LA Zine Fest, Long Beach, Pomona, all of those things, they tend to draw a counterculture crowd, people who are consider themselves to be more underground or non-traditional. If that's your audience, then those are definitely the places where you want to go. Book fairs like the LA Times Festival of Books, it's a bigger, broader event. So you're going to see probably a more traditional kind of audience, and definitely a more family-friendly audience. So if your work is a little on the risque side, you might not do that well at a, LA Times Festival of Books. Then again, you never really know. because it is about generalized interests, and there's probably a section for that type of work. Conventions or trade shows, think of things like a Comic Con. They're usually business to business if it's like a, trade person's convention, but it's usually an enthusiast kind of audience. Comic Cons, you will see people who are showing up, dressed up as their favorite characters and, cosplaying all day because it's, their community. And so those are kind of the like, if you know that that's your crowd and that's who's going to really be drawn to your work, then definitely invest in going to those over some of the other ones, because you never know. You might find more opportunities by spending more money on registering as a vendor for a Comic Con than you would spending a lot less money on a Zine Fest. And then when it comes to independent shows or readings, like really those are kind of easy, and you really should be scheduling those for yourselves. They're usually free, they're localized and audience specific. If you go to a bookstore, that bookstore usually has their regulars, and they have their own kind of network that they use to help promote. So if it's a bookstore that speaks to you that you like to go to and you have a book that's out, definitely take advantage, set up something with them. The costs and expenses that go into setting up these things are probably going to be more focused on the registration fees, but you'll probably also need things like tablecloths, tables, folding tables. If it's an outdoor kind of event, you definitely should take a shade structure, because there's not always going to be a canopy there available for you. And then always have a payment processor handy, something that can accept credit cards. Not everybody carries cash. Not everybody has Venmo, but almost everybody carries a phone. So if you have something that can do like the, tap to pay, that's always a good way to get money. Or, credit cards, right? Those are definitely worth investing in. And they're usually pretty cheap depending on which credit card processor you're using. And yes, while cash is king, as Abraham says, just remember that not everybody carries cash. So, any questions from anyone? I know I covered a lot, but I don't want to feel like y'all didn't have an opportunity to ask or comment.
Luis, do you went into the cost of these events for Boot or not?
I mean, a little bit. Zine fests tend to be low cost. I think the most expensive one is the LA Zine Fest. For those of you who are here in LA. But the LA Zine Fest, even then, they offer or at least they have in the past offered a sliding scale fee structure. You could spend anywhere from like $20 has been kind of the cheapest that I've spent on vendor fees for a Zine Fest, up to $100. That's kind of the range that I've seen. Book fairs like the LA Times Festival of Books, for that, without the discounts that we get as a nonprofit, it's about, I think it's about like $1,500, $1,500 for an author booth. It could range from $1,500 up to $2,000 for a small booth. Conventions, when we did the comic convention in Long Beach, I believe that was like a $5,000 registration fee, but that was given to us as a gift, as a donation. So we got lucky on that one. But it was also not exactly a very fruitful event for us, because that's not exactly the audience that our work usually attracts. So those are things to definitely consider. Also, book fairs and trade shows and conventions, those are usually multiple days. Zine fests are a lot of times just one day events. So you got to kind of like take into account, right, your time, and the return on the investment. How much traffic are you going to get from an event? Right? Zine fests tend to be pretty specific. So to the crowd, right? So there's maybe a limit to how much you could make. But again, the cost of being there isn't that high. So you could potentially earn more than what you spent on registration. I can tell you for sure the LA Times Festival of Books is one of our best events in the year. But we usually match how much we spend on the registration. We almost never go over. We almost never make a profit that day, especially when you consider the fact that, I'm paying people to be there, to help us. Abraham, Angie, myself, like, our time is compensated to be there. So that's all we do, kind of break even, but even then it's like just barely. Yes, as Jamie just pointed out, these types of things are usually more about getting your name out there. And it's a good way to generate buzz. It's a good way to, again, do market research and really understand what are the hot things that people that go to these events are into, which you could sometimes use as a way to inform your approach for your work. So, but good question, Abraham. Thank you for bringing that up. So if there are no other questions or comments, then I leave you with this. When it comes to this type of workshop, we have at least tried to give you some tools and resources in the past to help you get started on developing, like, say, your website last time. But this time, we're going to kind of push you to go back, right? Go back to one of the very first sessions that we did. And that is the session on building a budget. I know that that one was probably boring, maybe full of a lot of information that you're not always comfortable with researching, but it really, really helps you. Like I said before, having a budget and being able to plan for yourself, how you want to generate your revenues, that's going to be huge when it comes to writing grants, when it comes to applying for fellowships, and when it comes to figuring out what type of things will work for your fundraising purposes. Remember, it's not all about using Kickstarter. Patreon is a great tool, but it's not going to be the only tool you use to get support. You really want to make sure that you're thinking of all the possibilities to help get a project off the ground. And if you are budgeting for approximately $10,000 in an overall publishing cost, then you're probably going to be in the right ballpark for whatever grant you might want to apply to in the future. Because grants can range anywhere from like $100 up to 10 grand. And if you have that budget already prepared, that's how you can start, doing the little uh like I want to say nitpicking, but I know nitpicking isn't the word. That like nickel and diming of your revenues. You little by little, every dollar will add up, and it'll be a great start to your emerging career. Take out your calculators. Yes, the calculator does help, but I'm kind of with Jamie. Real nerds don't need calculators, but we sure do use them when we need them. We can be big enough to admit when we need one. So, all right. So yeah, go back to the budget template that I had created and shared with you all on Google Classroom. Really do take time to sit with it, and we are here to help answer questions. This particular session, again, has been recorded, and it will go up on our YouTube and on Google Classroom for you to review. But for those of you that are, in the program, I'd highly recommend that you go back and revisit that last video on building an artist project and planning it. Especially the section where we talk about that project budget template, because that's really going to help you. And in a couple of weeks, when we do our follow-up session for today, I'll be more than happy to help you understand better how to use that budget template. The template is not specifically a project management template. It's a budget template. So it's more for figuring out how much money you're going to spend and allocate to different categories. Project management wise, though, that's something that you could probably just even using a simple sheet of paper, you set certain goals for yourself. Creating a timeline will really help you. So, but if if all of you are interested in me developing some kind of project management template for you, just let me know in the chat and I'll start working on that. It would be cool. All right. So again, that's your homework. Look at the project budget template and start playing with it. You will hopefully find it very useful. And for everyone who is watching on our live streams, thank you for hanging out with us. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your support. This obviously is it's a lot of information to go over, but we are available as a resource for practically everyone. And those of you who are in the mentorship program now, you have that added benefit of working more directly with us. But for anybody else that is watching, you are always welcome to visit our website at distillarts.org to learn more. You can definitely follow us, click like and subscribe as well to our YouTube channel. We are at DSTL Arts on pretty much all the social medias, and we even give you the opportunity to reach out to us directly through our email. So that's it. And always keep your rich uncle's phone number and be nice to that rich uncle, according to Abraham. So I think with that,
True that.
true that. So with that, I think we will end tonight's session. I really appreciate all of you who joined in, and I look forward to, just helping you all out as you develop your budgets in the future. We'll end our live streams now. Again, thank you everybody for joining in on the live streams and who are watching the video afterwards. Y'all have a good rest of your night.